Well, thank you everyone so much for coming to today's Peacemaker Circle. We're very fortunate to have Brother Faplu with us today. So I will go ahead and do a brief introduction. Brother Faplu was ordained in 2003 and received transmission to teach from Thich Nhat Hanh in 2011. He has acted as the monastic editor for several of Thich Nhat Hanh's books, and he has worked on bringing mindfulness to schools and leads mindful backpacking retreats. Brother Pablo is currently taking part in the 3-month Rains retreat at Deer Park Monastery in Escondido, California. And so we're grateful that he is taking time to join us today. So without further ado, I will go ahead and turn the reins over to Brother Pablo.
Yeah, dear friends, dear Chloe, dear Zen Peacemakers International. I thought we could start with a short meditation so we can find a relaxing posture. Don't have to think about or worry about anything. Just enjoy this present moment of being together. If you like, you can put your feet flat on the floor and relax your shoulders. I like when I'm sitting in a chair to kind of sit without my back supported, but it's up to you, whatever feels comfortable. And we'll listen to a few sounds of the bell. We can just bring our attention back to our breathing, to our body, and see what's going on there. We can be curious about what's going on in our body and enjoy letting the sound of the bell penetrate every cell of our body, inviting us to wake up to the present moment. You can keep your eyes open or closed or half open, however you prefer. Breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. In, out. Breathing in, I follow with all my attention the whole length of my in-breath. As the air enters my nostrils, passing through the trachea, filling my lungs. Breathing out, I follow with all my attention the whole length of my out-breath. Following the in-breath, following the out-breath. Breathing in, I'm aware of my whole body, just as it is. Breathing out, I smile with love and care towards my body. In, aware of body. Out, smiling. Breathing in, I relax my body, my neck, my shoulders. Breathing out, I release any tension in my body. Relaxing the body, releasing tension in the body. Breathing in, I feel joy to be alive in this present moment. Breathing out, I smile to life within me and around me. Joy to be alive, smiling to life. So you may like to open your eyes again. Okay. So, dear friends, so it's nice to have a cozy group. How many of you are involved with the Zen Peacemakers International? You, okay, a few of you. And how many of you have practiced mindfulness before, or meditation? Everyone? Okay, good. Yeah. So thank you so much for this invitation from Chloe and the Zen Peacemakers International. I felt inspired to share a little bit about the Plum Village tradition and especially our engagement in some areas that I've been very active in my life as a monk, and how we are also engaged in a broader sense across our community. So we can also learn from all the other traditions. I mean, I personally, before I became a monk, and when I was a young monk, I grew up in New England and outside of New York, and I was very inspired by what I'd hear about the Zen Peacemaker order, and especially Bernie Glassman's work. I have a good Dhamma friend who is active doing street retreats in New York City and in Boston. And although I never formally did one, I spent quite a bit of time with just my backpack, sleeping in parks and experimenting with homelessness before I became a monk, to get the feeling for what it's like to just to be with very little and be take any patch of land as your resting place in the spirit of the Buddhist tradition. And I knew that I wanted to live my life as a monk in an order under a teacher who is engaged and is not shy to address situations of injustice in the world, and especially in the way of building community. So I'll maybe start sharing a bit, and then we'll see how it goes. If there's questions, we can make it very organic. Uh, since we are a small group, I'm happy to have also discussion and hear from you and what you're doing, and learn from each other. So I ordained as a monk in 2003 in Plum Village, France, and I had the opportunity to study with our teacher, you know, directly in many different situations. Shortly after that, we came here to Deer Park in 2004. The whole Sangha, we closed Plum Village, and the whole International Plum Village Sangha came here, where I'm living now in Southern California. And Tai said this center was a gift to America. And so the very fact of this monastery is kind of based on an offering of peace and love and compassion to a country which wreaked so much havoc in Thai's home country of Vietnam. And that has been the spirit with which Thai has approached socially engaged Buddhism. It's always in the spirit of giving, because it is relatively easy to criticize and blame, but it's difficult to build community that brings peace into the world, and that is what we're doing here at Deer Park. So for me, every day of my life as a monk is an act of resistance. Right outside the door of our monastery, so down, if you go down the hill, we're actually up in the mountain, go down the hill to our gate, we are right in the midst of Southern California sprawl and consumer culture. And we can get on our bikes and ride down maybe 20 minutes to a big Walmart and shopping malls and miles and miles of asphalt. And so we are actively resisting consumer culture. We're actively resisting the culture of busyness and nonstop distraction up here in the monastery. So we open our doors every Sunday to those who come from outside, maybe 300 or so people, for days of mindfulness. Some of you may have read the book The Miracle of Mindfulness, which is a letter Thai wrote in Vietnamese originally to his students in Vietnam, who continued his work after he was exiled, to help go out into small villages in the countryside during the war and bring sanitation, medicine, education to these farmers who had no school for their children, were not able to sometimes even provide a cup of soy milk for their children in the middle of the day. So Thai founded a university called Hanh University, in part of An Quang Buddhist Institute, in the mid-60s, when he returned from his sojourn in Princeton in Columbia. He, I think, was inspired as well by American programs like the Peace Corps. And as part of that university, he created what's called the School of Youth for Social Service. And because of Thai's standing as a monk, he was able to use the institution wisely to allow young people, very educated young people, who wanted to do something about the situation of the war, but not in an antagonistic way, but rather to build peace. He trained them, along with Sister Chan Kong, who at that time was practicing as a lay nun, you might say, because she knew at that time, it was, as a Buddhist nun in Vietnam, it would be very difficult to do social work. So she practiced like a nun, but she was a lay person, and together with a few other monks, as well as a lot of lay friends. They built up this movement, which was called in the American press Little Peace Corps in Vietnam. And they would train young people to, touch their heart, their we call bodhicitta, the heart of love, the mind of love, and inspire them to go out in groups of, sometimes alone, but usually with 2 or 3, to villages, sometimes villages that had been bombed, and build up these programs, win the trust of the villagers. They didn't come with any money. They just came with their heart of kindness and wanting to help. And some would, for example, meet with the children when the parents were out in the rice fields and start playing with them, and then eventually start teaching them some math or Vietnamese language. And when the villagers saw this, that they continued to do this day after day, week after week, then they gained trust, because it was very difficult to trust. At that time, that you had the communist forces that were coming at the nighttime, you had the American-backed forces coming in the daytime, and people who just wanted an end to the war oftentimes had to trust one side in the daytime and one side in the nighttime, just in order to have peace and spare their families from violence. So seeing this third way that Thai proposed of this School of Youth for Social Service was a great relief. They see that they are not trying to win us to one side or the other, but they're just there to help us to grow our community. And that is on the hearts of everyone, anywhere in the world. No matter what category we put them in, everyone wants to build community and take care of those loved ones around them. So that was the spirit of the School of Youth for Social Service. And Thai wrote The Miracle of Mindfulness as a letter to the workers who continued in his absence to build that movement. And he suggested to them that they practice a day of mindfulness every day. It means we set aside that day, kind of like a Sabbath, and we don't engage in our busy mind, but we practice taking care of ourselves. Most of the suffering in the world is because we don't take care of our body and mind. We want to take care of others, but we don't take care of ourselves. And so because we are not happy, we are not well, then we make others suffer. And that is kind of a fundamental tenet of Buddhist practice, but as well as a tenet of public health. If we want the public to be well, we want communities to thrive, then we need to help people take care of their own body and mind. And usually we do that by telling them what to do. We say, you need to eat this and not eat that, or you need to exercise, or you need to, whatever. And the spirit of the School of Youth in Social Service and Thai's movement of the Order of Interbeing in general is to inspire people. We don't go and tell them, do this or that, but we work from the point of view of inspiration. So if we are happy ourselves and we are healthy, then we inspire others to be happy and healthy. We can't just rely on words and teachings and programs to do that. We need to live the path. And then people are curious. They say, oh, this person has joy. This person has happiness. I want to be around them. I want to learn from them. And that has been Thai's way. It's not using authority or even like scientific evidence. Of course, we can learn from scientific research, but sometimes we use it like a hammer, right? And it doesn't work. Even all the evidence is there. We go in with our public health program, and somehow it doesn't bring about transformation because we're using the science like a hammer, and we don't really understand the suffering of the people. So the spirit of the School of Youth and Social Service has continued into the Plum Village to create the foundation for the Plum Village tradition. So Plum Village is our main center. It's in France, and it's a international practice center. So there are monks and nuns living there, but there are also sometimes at any given moment, maybe 100 lay residents living and training at the center of Plum Village. And then from Plum Village has grown many centers around the world. So Deer Park is the earliest one. We did have a center in Vermont shortly, but then it's moved to New York. So Deer Park is the first of the existing centers in the U.S. And so when Thich said Deer Park is a gift, that's our monastery, Deer Park Monastery. When Thich said that's a gift to the Americas, it means he's planting the Plum Village tradition, the spirit of inspiring others to practice mindfulness, to bring well-being into their life. He sees Deer Park as a kind of vehicle for that to happen here in the U.S., along with our other centers. And Thich is very much interested not just in a theoretical awakening, but in awakening that is realized in how we live our daily life. So a day of mindfulness means we live in an awakened way. Thich said we can be part-time Buddhas. So that keeps our inspiration alive. If we get caught up in ideas of awakening or enlightenment, it can be an obstacle to our real awakening every moment. So we try to remove any ideas or concepts about awakening, but rather practice in that day of mindfulness, being aware of our breathing, being aware of our step, living in an awakened way. So from my point of view, we're more interested in awakened activity than awakening as a state that you somehow attain. Like, I am capable of awakened activity in the present moment. But, I know also that seeds of emotions like anger and fear and despair are still there in my consciousness. And sometimes they manifest and they take over my mind. And I act and I think and I say things that cause myself and others to suffer. But in the next moment, I can let go of that and I can come back and I can practice awakened activity if I have mindfulness and I don't continue to get carried away by that emotion. Someone told me that a typical emotion only lasts a few minutes. From the time it manifests in our mind consciousness to the time when it ends, it's only a few minutes. But because we keep feeding it with our thinking and our perceptions, it continues to thrive and grow. So that's helped me lately to remember, like, so if I am feeling anger, then how have I been feeding that anger? Because the initial anger, it's only going to last a minute and a half, maybe a few minutes, unless I continue to feed it with my perceptions. So that's where the training of the mind comes into taking care of ourselves. So for us, the foundation of collective well-being is the well-being of each individual. And Thich used the image of candles to describe individual and collective consciousness. So you can have one candle and it shines light and there's intense light near the candle and it starts to become less so as you spread out, and then eventually it's just at a distance you just see it's very, very faint light. But if you bring another candle in, that candle will also produce light, but you cannot separate the light now of the two candles. You cannot say that this light is just from that candle and this light is from that candle, but they forming a collective radiance. And if you add another and another, right, we have a collective. So that is the collective consciousness. That is how consciousness functions. We can still see the individual candles, but the collective radiance that is formed by all of our thoughts, our worries, our fears, our mindfulness, it contributes to the collective fear or despair or mindfulness and compassion. So a day of mindfulness and coming together as a group to practice mindful breathing, mindful walking, mindful eating is creating a collective radiance, you might say, of mindfulness, a collective light of mindfulness. And that is something that happens at all of our centers, including Deer Park. At least once a week, we have a day of mindfulness and the public can come. And so we usually have about 300 people each Sunday coming up and practicing with us. So that is one concrete way which we engage in contributing to public well-being. But we also offer a number of programs, like we've worked with the local hospitals to see how we can bring mindfulness to our care of those who are ill. The hospital here in Escondido, actually, they came and did a day of mindfulness here in order to learn from us, and that contributed significantly to how they designed the new hospital. So they created spaces for the nurses, thinking about the well-being not only of the patients but also of the nurses, the doctors. They created, for example, rooms where there are little kind of adjunct side spaces that can be kind of closed off with a curtain, so that family members can come and spend the whole day with their beloved one who is ill, doing their work, so they could work in the room, but also be physically present for the patients. And so these are the kind of things that they came up with after practicing just one day of mindfulness here at Deer Park, because they saw that there's a center of how we should build a hospital, which is based on cultivating well-being. It's not just taking care of sick people. It's about how do you cultivate well-being. Was inspired by mindfulness practice. We have a movement we call Wake Up Schools. So we call our teacher the Master Thich Nhat Hanh. We use the term Thai. It means a monk or a teacher in Vietnamese. And it actually is a very humble term. Most people, if Thai goes to Vietnam, would call him Tin Su Thich Nhat Hanh. It means Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. But Thai didn't like so much that title. He just say Thai. And every monk who's a fully ordained monk is called Thai. I'm called Thai as well by Vietnamese friends who come up here. So it's Thai said, I'm just a simple monk. He didn't want to have these honorifics. So that is kind of part of that term that we use to refer to our teacher, Thai. So Thai was very inspired by the everyday heroes who are teaching our children, our teenagers, our college students. And so when he went back to India for the last time in 2000, what turned out to be the last time in 2008, and one of our senior lay Dhamma teachers there, Shantam Set, who has been organizing these wonderful Bodhi pilgrimages in India, where Buddhist practitioners, mainly from the West, but also now much more in Asia, can go and see the holy sites of the Buddha's life. So Shantam organized a tour in India in 2008, and he asked Thai, what should we focus on? And Thai said, we need to focus on teachers and education. And so the main retreat that we all offered in Dehradun was for teachers from all over India. And from that retreat came this movement, which we call now Wake Up Schools. And the backbone of that movement is what we call the Applied Ethics Initiative. So it means, how can we teach our teachers a way to be ethical in the world? Many of you may have heard of the 5 mindfulness trainings, which is an updated version of the 5 precepts. In each of the 5 trainings, we are aware of the suffering caused by, for example, violence. And we are determined not to kill, not to let others kill, and not to support any act of killing in the world, in our thinking, or in our way of life. For example, the first precept on not to kill. So built into the mindfulness trainings is an awareness of the suffering that is caused by that. So we don't just blindly follow the precept, but we cultivate mindfulness to understand that our actions have real effects in the world. And so the Applied Ethics Initiative of Wake Up Schools is looking into how we can create this kind of ethical way of living in education. And but originally it was called Applied Ethics Initiative, but some people told us we needed another name, so we call it Wake Up Schools for the whole movement to to first of all to take care of teachers. So in that way, our approach is maybe a little bit different. So we don't focus on teaching students primarily. We mainly focus on taking care of the teachers, because we know if the teachers learn how to take care of themselves, if we help to take care of the teachers in a retreat, and then the teachers learn how to take care of themselves, then quite naturally their students will be inspired, and their teaching of mindfulness will be easily accepted by their students. If we just use the techniques of mindfulness, but we don't practice them as a teacher, then it's very difficult to get the students to be inspired to practice it. So that is the insight, that same insight I mentioned at the beginning of first taking care of ourselves, we apply to the Wake Up Schools initiative. And so that movement has been going on for over more than 10 years now. And we've done retreats for teachers all over the world, in India, in Europe, in France, Spain, in Canada, in the US, in Indonesia, and now in various ways in Vietnam. Although we cannot kind of officially come in Vietnam for various political reasons, but there are many movements that are in a kind of nameless way. They are continuing Thai's teaching to bring Plum Village practice into schools and this applied ethics of the 5 mindfulness trainings. So that's a concrete way in which we are engaged in transforming the educational system. And I hope, and I think that's our vision one day, to have a wake-up school itself. Maybe it will happen here at Deer Park. We're hoping to. There are some teachers here right now who are inspired by that, and they say, well, maybe we can find a house that somebody is renting down below the monastery, and we can, we can just start to have some students and some teachers coming and teach, and just very organically in that way have a school that from the kind of ground up is built with these principles, and with also the spirit within our community of decision making, which is consensus based. So we don't organize ourselves as a hierarchy, because we're very aware that that has become kind of quite calcified in many areas of the Buddhist tradition. And so Thai wanted to bring democracy into the Buddhist Sangha. So we have a mix in our community. We create a balance between seniority and democracy. And that's the kind of spirit that we also want to bring into schools. So seniority means that we respect our elders, right? And we see them as part of the fabric of our community. Their experience, their wisdom can contribute so much. But we also are aware that seniority can lead to, if we grasp it the wrong way, it can lead to kind of hierarchy and kind of authoritarian structure. So we also have the element of democracy. And so when we make decisions, the whole kind of ordained bhikshu, bhikshuni order needs to agree on the decision within each monastery. So here at Deer Park, for example, the monks and nuns, we have 2 hamlets. And so when in each week we have a bhikshu meeting or bhikshuni meeting in the sisters' hamlet, and we have various topics, and everyone has to agree. All of the bhikshus have to agree on how we proceed with the given topic in the monastery. So we don't like vote for majority. Like majority rule is one kind of democracy, but the democracy we practice is we call consensus based. So everyone has to be on board. And we signify our consensus by remaining silent in the tradition of the Buddhist teaching. So if we speak out, that means there's something that's not quite doesn't fit with us yet. So we are obliged to speak out if we don't agree, or if there's missing information in the decision, or we need to incorporate some other aspect that perhaps not everyone else can see. So we get a lot of training in kind of synthesizing a variety of different ideas and coming up with a solution. It's almost never like yes or no, right? It's really about like bringing all the ideas together into one uh, decision or proposal that everyone can remain silent for. And so that's the kind of spirit we'd like to bring into Wake Up Schools. So reducing the need for kind of hierarchical or authoritarian structure, having participation of the students as well as the teachers, as well as those who take care of the school, like the physical plant managers or the janitors, right? You incorporate everyone into the school community. So at the moment, Wake Up Schools is primarily mindfulness practices. There's a book called Happy Teachers Change the World, which I really recommend. Even if you're not a teacher, there are many practices there that are described in a very clear way. And so I've heard that it's been used outside of education in many different areas, because we've spent a lot of time looking into how to present the basic practices of Plum Village in that book. And so it's very good for like training yourself in how to present those practices. And so that book kind of has testimonies from teachers who have brought Plum Village practices into schools. And mainly with that book, a teacher sometimes quite often actually not calling it Wake Up Schools, because we don't take the approach of an intervention in the sense that like, okay, now we're going to bring Wake Up Schools into our school from top down. Usually it's principal or somebody on the school board, somebody higher up, and they love Tai and Plum Village practice, and they want to kind of impose it on the whole school. But we learn that then you inevitably end up with people who are resisting and they don't like it. So now our approach much more is to do retreats for educators, and they get transformation on the retreat. And so because when somebody gets healing and transformation from the practice, then you don't have to do very much. Then they already are inspired, and they come back, and then they start to share with their colleagues, share with their students. Maybe they have a bell, just like we had. That's a very, very effective way we found for classrooms. You don't have to say anything even about breathing. Just say, we're just going to listen to a bell for a few moments at the beginning of each classroom, and then it's very popular. And then you can have your students invite the bell and rotate. And so the students get excited, like, today is my turn to invite a sound of the bell, and so that we can all come back to our breathing. And then that changes the whole energy of the entire class. So these kind of things are presented in the book, and they're ways that Wake Up Schools kind of, in a Trojan horse kind of way, kind of get into the schools. And we don't have to say anything about Buddhism or even mindfulness necessarily. Although now mindfulness is kind of very popular. So, but when we started, it was not so much. So easy to just talk about mindfulness or meditation, especially in public schools. So that's our Wake Up Schools initiative. And lately we've been, before I get into public health and the work we've been doing, but it's not unrelated. Many of our monastics are very engaged with the climate crisis. So working with policymakers internationally. So a number of our monastics went to the recent COP conference in Glasgow, and represented our community very skillfully. There's a wonderful TED talk by Sister True Dedication I recommend you watch, and also Brother Phap Lin and Tai Phap Yung, who is a former abbot here who lives here at Deer Park. They spoke with economists and many others They brought meditation and mindfulness into the conference so that climate activists can actually learn how to generate peace within themselves, because it's very difficult to help the situation to transform if you have a lot of agitation and antagonism in the way in which you present the situation of the climate crisis. People react and then they go the other way. So how can we learn, how can we help train those of us everywhere who in our hearts so deeply want to turn the, to not continue business as usual, but to make a great turning in the direction of our civilization and in the direction of our energy production and use and our care for the ecology of our planet. So that is an area that we are very active in, working with organizations and climate activists. And just last week, Christiana Figueres, who was the principal architect of COP21 in the Paris Climate Accords, she was really the one who was getting the groups together, just trying to overcome the differences and getting those accords really to happen. And she was just at the end of her wits, and she came to one of our centers, the EIB in Germany, and that's when she discovered Thich teaching, and she took refuge in the Plum Village practice. So that gave her the strength and the stability to be able to pull off this incredible feat. Really, I mean, with many others, of course, but she was the one who's really getting everyone, these groups from all different nations, to come together. So we were sitting on the mountain having tea on this past Sunday night, just enjoying the moon. And she continues to come back and get the healing and the stability she needs in Plum Village or here at Deer Park in our practice centers. So we're providing that space. And I asked her, what can we do more, Christiana? Like we want to know. And she's, because we have solar panels here providing much of our electricity at Deer Park. We now are shifting in the direction of using electric bikes for most of our local needs. And she said to me, Brother Pablu, the monasteries are already so low impact. Like, we don't have children, we're monastic, we're celibate. That's already, like, an American child is a joy. But from the point of view of resources, is a kind of environmental catastrophe to the planet. So, she said, already you're contributing in so many ways. You eat, we live in community, we eat together, and we rarely go out, and when we go out in large groups in the cars. So we're doing already so many things, and to squeeze out a little bit more like ecological efficiency in the monastery, it's not going to have much effect on the worldwide climate crisis. But what we can provide is a refuge for climate activists, people who are on the front lines doing this work, trying to change policies at an international level. We provide this space where they can come back to themselves, generate peace within themselves, so that they can go back out and do this important work. And that is another way in which we are engaged in supporting a transformation of our kind of collective trajectory as a civilization on this planet. And it also means falling in love with Mother Earth, because sometimes in the midst of policies we forget to enjoy the contact our foot makes with the earth at every step. And so that is really, like Tai said, peace is every step. So if we want to generate peace in ourselves, we have to have peace in our relationship to Mother Earth. And that means falling in love again with Mother Earth, seeing the beauty of this great planet, that we are not separate from the Earth, that the Earth is within us, and so forth. So these are all trainings that we offer to, well, first of all, to ourselves, to all the friends who come up here, and then to also frontline climate activists. And then I'll just close with our recent foray into public health. So we've been working with a number of scientists, well, I would say evidence-based activists, who are working in the field of public health. So training young people from around the world who will go back to their countries and establish the public health policies in mindfulness, in the Plum Village practice of mindfulness. So we're working with the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Dr. Lillian Chung is a longtime practitioner. She's a nutritionist, and she's been she's one of the few people to co-write a book with our teacher. We were quite stunned when she came, and she said to Tai, she said, "Tai, I'm writing a book about mindful eating, but I quote you everywhere in the book. Why don't we just co-write this book together?" And Tai agreed. And so this book, which I recommend to you, Savor, on mindful eating, it's really about establishing a global ethical diet for the world. And it starts with being just aware, just simply aware of the food that we're eating. We don't think about other things, our projects, the future, the past, while we're eating our food, but we learn how to fully enjoy the food while we're eating it in the present moment. And that's the foundation of establishing a revolution in nutrition. And so Dr. Chung is there at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and she's facilitated many connections with like Professor Dr. Walter Willett and the dean there, Michelle Williams, and they're very inspired by Thai's teaching, and they want to find a way to incorporate Plum Village practice into their training of public health policy graduate students. I've been actively involved in working to study the effects of mindfulness on children's eating habits. So during the pandemic, I worked with a lab at Dartmouth College, Dartmouth Geisel School of Medicine. So Diane Gilbert Diamond is one of the heads of a lab that's been studying the epidemic of obesity in children. And now they're incorporating Plum Village practices of mindfulness into their studies. So we designed a study where children learn about mindful breathing, they learn about mindful eating. They do a practice we call pebble meditation, which uses simple images like a flower to cultivate qualities of freshness, a mountain to cultivate solidity, stability, water to cultivate calm, peace, and when our mind is clear, it reflects things as they are, and then cultivating space. So these are 4 images we teach, and we have pebbles that they hold, and each pebble represents one of the images. So it's a kind of guided meditation for children, but works very well with all ages. And so that we've designed this kind of intervention, which is now in a pilot study for children, to see whether children who have already eaten to satiety, then after doing this mindfulness meditation, which is a little bit less than a half an hour, it's in the form of a video, but we give them pebbles, and they also have a tangerine, because they learn what we call tangerine meditation to learn mindful eating. So then we see whether, when they're presented with kind of typical snacks, relatively unhealthy snacks, whether there's any difference in the amount of their snacking as opposed to a control group. So these are kind of things that we're developing, like actual research in the effects of mindful eating on the health of children. And if you are interested in this area more, I encourage you to follow the course that we've been offering here at Deer Park, which is called Collective Awakening, Thich Nhat Hanh's Vision for Mindfulness and Public Health. So you can find it on the Deer Park YouTube channel or our website. And there we're actually reading through a selection of Thai's body of work, Thai's books. starting with his journals as a young monk when he created a community called Fragrant Palm Leaves in the central highlands of Vietnam. Very, very beautiful book. If you haven't read one book of Thai, I would recommend this book. It's so personal and touching, to Thai's account of building this community. He frames it within staying at a summer camp in New Jersey, in Medford, New Jersey, when he was invited to come and stay at Princeton for a year. So he took time out and he was at this kind of like summer camp, and he was teaching meditation to kids, and he reminisces about the community he had built that was then eventually shut down by the authorities of the South Vietnamese government, and which we still are continuing today to try to actually, now that our teacher has passed away, to build a center there in Thai's name. It's not easy to do in Vietnam, but this is really like the cradle from which Plum Village manifested. Thai's vision to create a new kind of community where monastics and lay practice together, and we focus on building beloved community, which he later became inspired by his befriending Martin Luther King Jr. And when Dr. King was assassinated, Thai was devastated, and he committed himself to continue Dr. King's journey to create beloved community in the world, and that has been a central aspect of Plum Village as well. So Fragrant Palm Leaves, this community Thai built, the vision of Dr. King, and the practice of mindfulness, these are all these like very solid roots underpinning the whole Plum Village tradition, and continuing in the form of all the initiatives that I mentioned today. And there are others, which I could go on and on. But this kind of gives you a flavor of what we're doing, kind of engaged Buddhism. And I just end the talk portion of this by saying that when I came as a novice here to Deer Park, when I was sent here to help in 2006, after a few years in Plum Village, and also joining Thai on his first time returning to Vietnam in 2005, myself and Thai Pho Po, who was a former abbot, who later became abbot here of Deer Park, we went to visit Thai. and it's very interesting what Thai told us. Well, one, he said, you should come back to Plum Village after 2 years. But the other thing he told us was that we shouldn't try to, we shouldn't separate engaged practice from contemplative practice. Many of us, we think, oh, my practice is like too engaged, or so I need more contemplation. And then others of us, we think, oh, my practice is too contemplative, I need to be more engaged. And then we kind of get frenetic and we start doing things. And Thai just collapsed in that moment for us, this kind of dualism which we create in our head between the contemplative practice and an engaged practice. And from that moment on, I saw that there is no separation between the contemplative and the engaged practice. If we are deeply practicing contemplative awakening, that is engagement. And if we are deeply practiced in our engagement, we are actually a contemplative. We are transforming ourselves from within. So the two collapse into one. They are non-dual, of a non-dual nature, and that teaching has informed my own practice. I notice that sometimes I'll just be carried away by doing projects, but it's actually not really engagement because I'm not really there in my body. And other times I feel kind of lazy, and I don't want to do anything with anybody, and that's not contemplation, right? So sometimes we can be isolated, we can be up in the mountain by ourselves, but our way of living is not engaged. It's not contemplative. It's not engaged. So seeing in what ways our thinking is separating the two, and seeing that they are of the same nature. That's a powerful teaching I received from Thai when I came here to Deer Park, and it's really helped me to see how to be a monk in the world. Okay, that's 1 hour. So I'll stop here. Maybe we can listen to a sound of the bell and come back to our breathing, come back to our body, and then have some moment for questions or comments. Yeah, so we can just do this freestyle. If anyone would like to say anything or ask a question. Yeah. Jim.
Hi, thank you. First off, my apologies. I had a little conflict in time, so I came late. So it's possible you already spoke of this or addressed this, but it was a beautiful talk, beautiful sharing. I appreciate that. Do you find your initiatives get pushback from communities, and if so, how do you adjust? How do you respond to those pushbacks?
So I shared a little bit about the interventions we've done in schools. We've done, usually week-long interventions when we started Wake Up Schools back in 2012, 2013, in schools in India, as well as there was actually a Buddhist school, which is no longer there, in Brighton, UK. And what I noticed in the long run was that most of the teachers were very happy to have the monks and nuns there for 3 or 4 days or a week, and kind of a break from normal activities, and to practice. They enjoyed practicing mindfulness. But although there would be maybe 1 or 2 teachers that really took it on and brought it into their classrooms, generally speaking, it kind of there was some resistance for incorporating it into the daily program of the school. Even if there was support, usually we always had support from the highest authority in the school, but there would be teachers who just felt like, I'm not sure about this, and they just quietly kind of resisted. And that's part of the reason why I share that we kind of drew back from that approach, and even encouraged teachers to reflect on how they present the practices, not necessarily presenting them as, say, wake up schools, but rather just to sit with a child who's causing disturbance in the classroom and just hold his hand and breathe for 5 breaths, so that kind of like the proof is in the pudding. When teachers in the school see that this teacher somehow has this magical, I mean, not really magical, but has this effect on kids that nobody else can deal with, then that speaks volumes, and they want to learn, like, how are you doing that? And then they ask questions, and then we tell them, you don't have to say anything about Wake Up Schools or Plum Village, just do it. And then what happened with some of the teachers who are most effective was that the schools actually see, like, this is our teacher. They don't see it as an outside program that's coming from outside in, but rather they see, like, our teacher is doing this. We have this amazing teacher, and she does this practice of 5 breaths with difficult young kids, and it works. And now we're doing sitting meditation, offering it for the teachers once a day, or mindful eating once a week. So it kind of grows like that. So that reduces the resistance when you don't have this kind of branding, and you feel like it's coming from within. So that's something I learned over these past 10 years that Wake Up Schools has been in existence. So that's why we focus much more on just the personal transformation of the teachers, because then we know like they're already established in their schools, most of them, and just by their presence and their transformed presence and practice of mindfulness, they're going to transmit far more than we could do in a kind of overt way with a kind of established program. So there, and anyway, there are many mindfulness programs out there, and we saw like we don't have the capacity, we don't have their level of organization. We're not going to kind of be raising funds to try, kind of develop curricula, and kind of getting them into schools. That's just not. We saw like that as monks and nuns that just stressed us out thinking about it. So we try to focus on what our forte is, which is helping people on their path of transformation through offering retreats. That's one way of like kind of dealing with pushback in that particular case. I can't speak as much to the climate activism stuff. I've been active, but not on like kind of front. We've done a number of retreats for young people in Plum Village that I was very involved with. We called Wake Up Earth, and we did have members from Extinction Rebellion in the UK coming, like leaders from that movement. And so I did have a chance to hear from them and hear about some of the ways in which they were resistant and to this kind of spiritual teaching, because some of them, they're pretty hardcore activists, and they tend to kind of be very skeptical of any kind of spiritual path which is overt in any way. I mean, I think they all have some kind of spiritual aspect to their activism, but a lot of them have an allergy to anything that looks anything a little bit organized. So, I mean, we always try in Plum Village to keep this aspect of organism rather than an organization. Not to get caught up in titles and bureaucracy and all this kind of thing. So we try not to have titles within the community. That's something Thich saw that really created all kinds of obstacles for the kind of work he wanted to do in Vietnam. And so he kind of built up the Plum Village community based on the principles of brotherhood and sisterhood rather than like administration or bureaucracy. And so that helps. I think that when, after a while, those Extinction Rebellion activists, they connected with that. They got that. And there's a great film, trying to remember the name, but if you look up Evermind Media online, so Dutch filmmaker Walter Verhoeven, he made a film about Vishal, who's an Extinction Rebellion activist and a doctor who basically left his medical practice as a young doctor to join the Extinction Rebellion movement. And then he comes to Plum Village and he starts practicing mindfulness. He was actually in my group in the retreat, and I'm trying to, I want to say it's called One Earth, or I can't remember the name, but if you go on to evermind.media, you can find that film, and it's very beautiful. It's very inspiring, and the film was made like just as the COVID pandemic kind of abruptly cut off Extinction Rebellion activities, and he was drawn back to his medical profession to help with the pandemic. But it kind of gives insight into some of the like you're saying, the pushback, because he's quite skeptical also in many ways of the practice. But then you see this kind of how he just kind of sees this. Wow, this is not like necessarily organized religion. This is more like an organism, a communal body, which is the way we see ourselves in Deer Park and Plum Village. So those are some ways that I see that we try to avoid. And the other thing is we generally try to avoid like people will come to us and say, what is Plum Village take on da 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 da, or like what is Plum Village's policy on da 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 da, and we really avoid making like communal stances or policies in that sense, because we want to engage with everyone. We don't want to limit ourselves to like draw our organization into like taking as monks and nuns, we take a stand against injustice and you know, the violation of ecology. Rebel for Life. Thank you, Natalie. That's it. That's the name of the film. Thank you. I couldn't remember it. Rebel for Life is the name of the film on Evermind Media. Very beautiful film. Yeah, so it's so important that we keep our door open to everyone. Otherwise, I can't see how it's a true spiritual path. So sometimes taking an overt stance against something can close the doors unknowingly. And so, in the spirit of right view, in the sense of we don't hold on to any view or ideology. If you read the 14 mindfulness trainings that Thich created in members of the School and Youth and Social Service, were the first 6 members of the Order of Interbeing in the 60s, that the first mindfulness training says we don't attach ourselves to any ideology, even Buddhist ones. The truth is found in life. And so but that doesn't make me we cannot take a stand against injustice, right? We can stand firm when we see violence being perpetrated against people, but we have to be very careful getting attached to one view or ideology. That's a way that we get pushback. We create sides.
Yeah.
And the beauty of Thay's work in Vietnam was to find a middle way between the North and the South, and he's continued that throughout his whole life. So that's the spirit in which we practice and we avoid pushback. But that doesn't mean that sometimes people, there are people who don't like Thay's way. Thay's had people saying, well, anyway, I won't get into it, but there's been a lot of pushback in many ways to Plum Village practice and Thay's way, and Thay just keeps his heart open and compassionate, and always sees that man is not our enemy, as he wrote in his beautiful poem.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Lumi?
Thank you so much, dear Brother Papu. I am just thrilled that your presence is here with the Zen Peacemakers. I've been a part of Thay's lineage since the early 1990s. And I've been to 2 retreats, one up here in Colorado in Estes Park in 2011 when Thay was there. And and I met Sister Peace there also. And in 2017, my beloved partner and I went to Plum Village to do a cooking retreat. And I was reading Dogen's instructions to a chef at the same time. And Bernie Glassman wrote a book, Instructions to the Cook. And I've done the first Native American Bearing Witness retreat with the Zen Peacemakers in 2015, and have been involved with the Zen Peacemakers for quite a while. And I find that there is an interconnection between Plum Village practices and the White Plum lineage of the Zen Peacemakers. It's a really beautiful interconnection, and I practice with both without feeling a separation between them. I see all the connections between them, as well as a connection between the sound chamber communities around the world, envisioned by Joseph Rael, Beautiful Painted Arrow. And all 3, Bernie Glassman, Thay, Joseph Rael, all 3 of them are very humble teachers who didn't want to be elevated to a place of hierarchy. And I so appreciate that as a female practitioner. And everything that you shared with us today just so resonates deeply within my bones, within my marrow, and my heart womb. I call it my heart womb instead of my heart mind. But I function as a teacher, and I am a private flute teacher, but I've also done music therapy. And I brought the bell of mindfulness to the Bachebelo orphanage in South Africa. And would was given free rein just to show up into the different classrooms. There were 200 kids there, and just ring the bell. And the teachers appreciated that, and the kids all stopped, and I let them ring the bell at different times during meals. I ate what they ate, I did what they did, and I offered music and art therapies, and also this bell of mindfulness, which is so beautiful. And I have a student now that I just started, and our first lesson was just so difficult. There was so much resistance with this child. And so I met with his mother and the child for the next lesson, and I brought in the bell of mindfulness. And I said, you know, after learning what I learned about them, his parents are going through a divorce, and he's been diagnosed with ADHD, and I have my own thoughts around all of that diagnosing. I said, what do you need most? He said, I feel stressed out. I feel overwhelmed. And I said, well, let's do a little meditation. So ever since that second lesson, we've been doing meditation for 15 minutes with the bell of mindfulness, and I do some sound therapy. And this has totally turned around the whole mind of this child and his mother. They brought in their grandmother, and their dog comes into the lesson. The whole family. The brother comes in from a piano lesson late into the flute lesson, and it's really such a beautiful practice. It's so simple, but it's so poignant and so penetrating. And I've heard various resistances from different sanghas that I've practiced with about Thai's understanding of mindfulness. And I just say, you got to read the books and you got to do the practice, and then you'll understand the depth of this practice. My partner and I sit with the Zen and the art of saving the Earth Mother right now. We do it in the morning when we do our service and our zazen, and we read a chapter of that. I love Sister True Dedication. I love Sister Peace. I love you too. I've seen you on several of the raft issues videos and writings, and Lion's Roar. I've just stayed engaged since the early 90s. And I lost a significant other in the early 90s to a car accident where a young man drunk hit my significant other, and he died. And I was like catapulted into a cocoon, into a very dark place. And I had an authentic elder who was a practitioner in Thai's lineage, and also a practitioner in Joseph Rael's lineage. So she very tenderly helped me through that pain and introduced me to Thai's teachings. And I just feel this deep well of gratitude for Thai, for Joseph Rael, for all the monks and nuns at Plum Village who continue this collective awakening. You know, I love your image of the candles, of all the collective candles. And when Thai passed away and Plum Village opened the internet being doors to the world, many of our circles understood that, like, the earth was lit up. Like, if we saw it from outer space, all of these practitioners around the world that Thai has touched one at a time, the monks and nuns have touched one at a time, and we are practicing one at a time and touching those people, just lit up the whole earth. And I just felt like a deep sense of healing and holing, like WHOLE, holing, that happened through Thai's death. I mean, he kept teaching even through all of that ceremony, and he wasn't physically here. What a beautiful thing. And I'm so thrilled that your presence is here with ZBI. I hope they have you come back more often. And I really appreciate the non-hierarchical understanding of Plum Village and Thai's teaching and the importance, deep importance of that. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart and the inside of my marrow.
Yeah, Thai has inspired so many of us, right? And I was also so moved when, after Thai passed away, the outpouring from the State Department of the United States, I could not believe made a statement. I mean, but all over the world, so many, not only spiritual leaders, but political leaders, writers, just felt moved to tell the world how Thai had changed their life, transformed their way. So thank you for your sharing.
Are there any last questions before we close out? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Brother Paplu. It's been wonderful. And thank you, everyone who's come. We really appreciate your presence here today.
Yeah,
We hope to see you again.
Thank you so much for hosting this wonderful meeting, Chloe. And yeah, I do hope we can continue to learn on our path together with the Zen Peacemakers and Plum Village and Deer Park. We're here for you. I hope someday we can do street retreats here in Escondido.
Yes. Well, we'll be in touch about that.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.